Hello everyone. So we finished off with the first two sections of this book, namely the sections which discuss using neural nets to recognize handwritten digits, and the second section which discusses how the backpropagation algorithm works. So finally we have moved on to the third section which discusses how we can improve the way in which our neural networks learn. So let's begin. So again, the fashion would be the same. I'll read stuff and I'll try to give out intuitions which help me understand that particular concept carefully. And while I know some of this stuff, other stuff is also new to me, and I, of course, learn alongside you. Okay, so when a golf player is first learning to play golf, they usually spend most of their time developing a basic swing. Only gradually do they develop other shots, learning to chip, draw, and fade the ball, building on and modifying their basic swing. In a similar way, up to now, we've focused on understanding the back propagation algorithm. It's our basic swing, the foundation for learning in most work on neural networks. In this chapter, I explain a suite of techniques which can be used to improve on our vanilla implementation of back propagation and so improve the way our networks learn. Okay, so this was quite self-explanatory. They're saying that backpropagation is like the most fundamental thing used in neural networks. So, but it, as we saw, like in the previous videos, backpropagation has been there since the 70s, 80s. So, of course, updates have been made to make it better. These techniques we'll develop in this chapter include a better choice of cost function known as the cross entropy cost function, four so-called regularization methods, L1 and L2 regularization, dropout, and artificial expansion of the training data, which make our networks better at generalizing beyond the training data, a better method for initializing the weights in the network, and a set of heuristics to help choose good hyperparameters for the network. I'll also overview several other techniques in less depth. The discussions are largely independent of one another, so you may jump ahead if you wish. We'll also implement many of the techniques in running code and use them to improve the results obtained on handwriting classification problem studied in chapter 1. Of course, we're only covering a few of the many techniques which have been developed for use in neural nets. The philosophy is that the best entry to the plethora of available techniques is in-depth study of a few of the most important. Mastering those important techniques is not just useful in its own right, but will also deepen your understanding of what problems can arise when you use neural networks. That will leave you with well prepared to quickly pick up other techniques as you need them. So the author is basically saying that he's going to discuss these techniques, namely these ones, and why these ones, because they can help us first of all increase the performance of our neural networks which uh, are of primary importance to us. Secondly, when you study these techniques you'll also get to know why these techniques came into being, right, or why we are using the cross entropy cost function. So it would also help you get familiar with the problems which can come up with neural networks if you do not take these into consideration. And of course, once you have these down, you can obviously like be it would be much easier for you to pick up other techniques. Okay, so now the cross entropy cost function. Most of us find it unpleasant to be wrong. Soon after beginning to learn the piano, I gave my first performance before an audience. I was too nervous and began playing the piece an octave too low. I got confused and couldn't continue until someone pointed out my error. I was very embarrassed. Yet, while unpleasant, we also learn quickly when we are decisively wrong. You can bet that the next time I played before an audience, I played in the correct octave. By contrast, we learn more slowly when our errors are less well defined. This is like a good example or a good introduction. So if you tell the machine when it makes an error that you're making an error, then it would try to fix it, right? But if you tell it, if the error is large but you just give a low signal there's a slight error, then it wouldn't really make major changes or learn quickly. But if you tell it, like machine, you're making big errors, you need to fix yourself, so it would try to fix itself by making big changes and not just moving the stuff around by say a value of 0.001 or something. So ideally we hope and expect that the neural networks will learn fast from their errors. Is this what happens in practice? To answer this question, let's look at a toy example. The example involves a neuron with just one input. So you have the weights and the bias. We'll train the neuron to do something ridiculously easy. Take the input 1 to the output 0. Of course, this is such a trivial task that we could easily figure out an appropriate weight and bias by hand without using a learning algorithm. However, it turns out to be illuminating to use gradient descent to attempt to learn a weight and bias. So let's take a look at how the neurons learn. To make things definite, I'll pick the initial weight to be zero point 0.6 and the initial bias to be zero point 0.9. These are generic choices used as a place to begin learning. I wasn't picking them to be special in any way. The initial output from the neuron is 0.82, so quite a bit of learning will be needed before a neuron gets near the desired output 0. Click on Run in the bottom right corner below to see how the neuron learns an output much closer to 0. Okay, uh, so it's reducing its cost and also arriving on some values of weight and bias. Okay, so note that this isn't a pre-recorded animation. Your browser is actually computing the gradient, then using the gradient to update the weight and bias and displaying the result. The learning rate is eta is 0.15, which turns out to be slow enough that we can follow what's happening, but fast enough that we can get substantial learning in just a few seconds. The cost is the quadratic cost function introduced in chapter 1. I'll remind you of the exact form of the cost function shortly, so there's no need to go and dig up the definition. Note that you can run the animation multiple times by clicking run again. Okay, so again, we see that we started from the initial value, and after 300 epochs we've reached 0.09, so we've estimated or reached 0 quite well. As you can see, the neuron rapidly learns a weight and bias that drives down the cost and gives an output from the neuron of about 0.09. That's not quite the desired output 0, but it's pretty good. Suppose, however, that we instead choose both the starting weight and the starting bias to be 2.0. In this case, the initial output is 0.98, which is very badly wrong. Let's look at how the neuron learns to output 0 in this case. Oh. So you can see the plot is a bit different. Although this example uses a learning rate, same learning rate, eta is 0.15, we can see that the learning starts out much more slowly. Indeed, for the first 150 or so learning epochs, the weights and biases don't change much at all. Then the learning kicks in, much as in our first example, the neurons output rapidly, more closer to 0. Yeah. So essentially, what he's saying is, like in the first example, the plot it consistently fell down quickly, right? Here, but for the first 150 or so learning epochs, you can see that there isn't much different in the weights and biases because the cost function doesn't come down. To remind you, if the weights and biases were changing like drastically, then the output would also be changing drastically, and the cost would be coming down drastically. This behavior is changed when contrasted to human learning. As I said at the beginning of the section, we often learn fastest when we are badly wrong about something. But we've just seen that our artificial neuron has a lot of difficulty learning when it's badly wrong, far more difficulty when it's just a little wrong. What's more, it turns out that this behavior occurs not just in this toy model but in more general models or networks. Why is learning so slow? And can we find a way of avoiding the slowdown? Okay, so what they're essentially trying to say is that this might seem counterintuitive, right? So when we had a slight error, then the model fixed it quickly, but now there's a large error, then the model should fix it even more quickly, right? But what we're seeing is that the model is taking much longer and much more time, and the value was not even like as close as it was in the first case in the same number of epochs, right? So what they're trying to say is this problem is not just in this toy model, but this problem arises again and again in even larger networks. So we need to understand why this problem occurs and how we can curb it. To understand the origin of the problem, consider that a neuron learns by changing the weights and biases at a rate determined by the partial derivatives of the cost function. So the partial derivative of the cost with weight and cost with the bias. So saying learning is slow is really the same as saying that these partial derivatives are small. So you might remember that during gradient descent, you take these and multiply these by the learning rate and then subtract these from uh, the weights and biases, right? So if these values are small, only then would you be subtracting small quantities. and wouldn't be making huge differences. The challenge is to understand why they are small. To understand that, let's compute the partial derivatives. Recall that we are using the quadratic cost function, which from equation 6 is given by this. So this is the quadratic cost function, where A is the neuron's output. When the training input x is 1 is used and y is 0 is the corresponding desired output. To write this more explicitly in terms of the weights and biases, recall that A is sigmoid of z, where z is wx plus b. And using the chain rule to differentiate, you can easily get these expressions. So when you take the derivative of the cost with respect to uh, weight, first of all, you'll take the derivative of this with respect to y minus a, so you'll get 2y minus a by 2. The 2's will get cancelled out, so y minus a will remain, and then you'll have to take the derivative of a with respect to the weight, so you will get a negative sigmoid prime of z, and again you'll get the term x. Where's the x coming from? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, this is the x, because when you take the derivative with respect to the weight finally, wx would the term wx plus b. Okay, so I think I lost track with you, so I'll do the derivative once again. So first of all, you take the derivative of the cost with respect to y minus a. The 2 comes here, the 2's get cancelled out, y minus a is here. We'll have a look at why this got reversed, but or you can see that at the very next step. So now you'll have to take the derivative of y minus a with respect to a. So you'll get the negative sigmoid prime of z, right? But the negative would go in here and convert the y minus a to a minus y. And finally, you will take the derivative of z with respect to w. So you'll get x, because b is a constant and the derivative of wx with respect to w would only be x, because the it would be essentially x is a constant here and you're taking the derivative of w with respect to w, which is 1. Also, you can now see why this is here. The first steps are same, but in the end you'll take the derivative of z with respect to b, and you'll get a 0 here and a 1 here. Okay, where I have substituted x is 1 and y is 0. To understand the behavior of these expressions, let's look more closely at the sigmoid term on the right hand side. So this is the shape of the sigmoid function. We can see that this graph, that the neuron's output is close to 1, the curve gets very flat. Yep, and so sigmoid z gets very small because the slope is tending to 0. Equations 55 and 56, they then tell us that these gets very small. This is the origin of the learning slowdown. What's more, as we shall see a little later, the learning slowdown occurs for essentially the same reason in more general neural networks, not just the toy example which we've been playing with. So when uh, okay, when the neuron's output is quite close to 1 at this location, what they're saying is that the slope is very small, and when the slope is very small, then these values are very small. So when these values are very small, then once you multiply other values with them, the gradients also are very small. So due to these very small gradients, gradient descent occurs very slowly. So now introducing the cross entropy cost function. How can we address the learning slowdown? It turns out that we can solve the problem by replacing the quadratic cost with a different cost function known as the cross entropy. To understand the cross entropy, let's move a little away from our super simple toy model. We'll suppose instead that we are trying to train a neuron with several input variables x1, x2 and so on, and corresponding weights w1, w2 and so on, and a bias b. Okay, so you have x1, x2, x3 here, the corresponding weights w1, w2, w3 here, and the bias b for the neuron. And this gives an output a, which is sigmoid of z, and z would essentially be w1 x1 plus w2 x2 plus w3 x3, or the summation of wj xj over all j, and then you add the bias b. Okay, so this is the definition of the cross entropy. So this is a huge thing when you look at it for the first time, but we'll obviously get into the intuition. So this is negative 1 over n, the summation over y natural log of a plus 1 minus y times the natural log of 1 minus a, where n is the number of items of training data. The sum is over all training inputs x and y is the corresponding desired output, right? So over all training inputs, you find the desired output y, and you also find a, which is essentially the value which you get after activation. And then, like in the first case, you had for quadratic cost, you had this y minus a square by 2, right? Um, y minus a square by 2. Here, instead of using that relation, we are going to use this large relation. It is not obvious that the expression 57 fixes the learning slowdown problem. In fact, frankly, it's not even obvious that it makes sense to call this a cost function, right? This is the first reaction which I had when I first had a look at the cross entropy cost function. Before addressing the learning slowdown, let's see in what sense the cross entropy can be interpreted as a cost function. Okay, so two properties in particular make it reasonable to interpret the cross entropy as a cost function. First, it's non-negative, that is, C is greater than 0. To see this, notice all the individual terms in the sum in 57 are negative. Since both log are of number in the range 0 to 1, right? So y, even though y is the desired output, it's positive, but a would be between 0 and 1, so this would be negative. So this whole term as a whole would be negative. 1 minus y would be positive, however, the natural log of 1 minus a would be negative because the natural log is negative for numbers less than 1, and so this entire quantity inside is negative, but you have a negative outside, so it makes it a positive. Second, if the neuron's actual output is close to the desired output for all training inputs x, then the cross entropy will be close to 0. To see this, okay, they're overlapping, but we'll have a look above. To see this, suppose for example that y is 0 and a is approximately 0 for some input. This is a case when the neuron is doing a good job on that input. So it wanted to predict a 0 and it's approximately predicting a 0. We see that the first term in expression 57 for the cost vanishes since y is 0. So this term vanishes, and this term is 1 minus 0, 1, but this is an ln1. ln1 is 0 again. So this entire cost is 0. A similar analysis holds when y is 1 and a is approximately 1. So when y is 1 and a is approximately 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. So this term vanishes, and the first term would be 1 ln 1. ln 1 is again 0, so the entire cost is 0. And so the contribution to the cost will be low provided the actual output is close to the desired output. Summing up, the cross entropy is positive and tends towards 0 as the neurons get better at computing the desired output y for all training inputs x. These are both properties we intuitively expect for a cost function. Indeed, both properties are also satisfied by the quadratic cost. So that's good news for the cross entropy. But the cross entropy cost function has the benefit that unlike the quadratic cost, it avoids the problem of learning slowdown. To see this, let's compute the partial derivative of the cross entropy cost with respect to weights. So we substitute a sigmoid of z into equation 57. Again, equation 57 is this equation, and you'll substitute a sigmoid of z, and when you take the derivative with respect to uh, the a particular weight, you'll get this term. So how did they exactly get this? I'll not like show everything, but I'll just tell you. When you take the derivative of the natural log, say if you have ln x and you take the derivative with respect to x, then you get 1 over x. So ln the derivative of ln a with respect to a would be 1 over a, and 1 over a is essentially sigmoid of z, and then you will take the derivative with respect to the particular weight of the sigmoid, so you will get this term in both of these. And if you take the derivative here, again you will get 1 minus y upon 1 minus sigmoid of z, and the negative sign because you have a negative a, and then you can take this term common from both of them. Alright, now again this inside remains the same, however this term can again be, the derivative can again be taken, so the derivative of sigmoid would be sigmoid prime of z, and then you'll have wx plus b, right? So wj xj plus b, and the derivative of wj xj plus b with respect to wj would simply be xj, and this makes sense. put when you take a common denominator and just simplify the stuff, you'll get this expression. So this is just taking the common denominator and going from here to here. Now using the definition of the sigmoid, so sigmoid z is 1 over 1 plus e to the negative z, and a little algebra, you can show that the sigmoid prime, the derivative of sigmoid is sigmoid z into 1 minus sigmoid of z. So you can verify this, but let's just accept it. So you can just go ahead and verify this if you want. Pause the video, try it out. You can see that sigmoid z and sigmoid prime z and sigmoid z and 1 minus sigmoid z term cancel it in the equation. Okay, so when you substitute this term by this, you can see that the denominator and this term get cancelled out. So the partial derivative with respect to a particular weight is nothing but this, which is just take the particular weight and multiply it by the predicted output, which is sigmoid of z, and subtract the difference between the actual output. And this is a beautiful expression indeed. It tells us that the rate at which the weight learns is controlled by sigmoid of z minus y, that is, by the error in the output. The larger the error, the faster the neuron will learn. This is just what we would intuitively expect. In particular, it avoids the learning slowdown caused by the sigmoid z term in the analogous expression for the quadratic cost. Equation 55, when we use the cross entropy, the sigmoid prime z terms get cancelled out in, uh, and so we no longer need worry about it being small. So you no longer have to worry about the cost function getting a zero slope as it tends to a particular value. This cancellation is the special miracle ensured by the cross entropy cost function, because you can see that this is arising due to the property of the derivative of the natural log, which is a part of the cross entropy loss function. And this is, as we'll see later, the cross entropy was specifically chosen to have just this property. In a similar way, when you take the partial derivative with respect to the bias, so this term, exact same process. Just in the end, you have wj xj plus b, and when you take the partial derivative with respect to b, the partial derivative can be split into the derivative of xj wj, which would be 0 with respect to b, and the derivative of b with respect to b, which would be 1. Again, this avoids the learning slowdown caused by the sigmoid prime z term in the analogous equation for the quadratic cost equation 56. Because when you had the quadratic cost, the equation had the sigmoid prime z term. So I won't do this. So you can just verify this. I'm fairly confident in my skills on derivatives, and I'm going to take the author on his word. But you can try this out. Definitely, I recommend you to. Let's return to the toy example we played with earlier and explore what happens when we use the cross entropy instead of the quadratic cost. To reorient ourselves, we'll begin with the case where the quadratic cost did just fine. The starting weight is zero point 0.6 and the bias is zero point 0.9. And when you use the cross entropy, you can see that the output is uh, the neurons learn perfectly well in this instance, just as it did earlier. And now let's look at the case where the neurons got a little stuck. Link for comparison. Okay, so this was when we were using the quadratic cost, and now when we are using the uh, so cross entropy loss, you can see that it learns quite well. So success, this time the neuron learns quickly, just as we hoped. If you observe closely, you can see that the slope of the cost curve was much steeper initially than the flat region initial flat region on the corresponding curve for the quadratic cost. It's that steepness which the cross entropy buys us, preventing us from getting stuck just when we'd expect a neuron to learn fastest. That is when the neuron starts out badly wrong. Okay, what they're trying to say here is this slope, this has a very steep slope compared to here, right? So this is why we use cross entropy, why we brought in the whole cross entropy deal. This prevents us from getting stuck when we expect a neuron to learn fastest. So when the neuron is far away from the desired value, when its outputting value is far away, we want it to learn quickly. We want it to quickly come to the correct value, and and cross entropy does that. It allows us to do that. I didn't say what learning rate was used in the example just illustrated. Earlier with the quadratic cost we used eta 0.15. Should we have the same learning rate in the new examples? In fact, with the cost change, when the change in cost function, it's not possible to say precisely, what it means to use the same learning rate, because learning rates are accompanied by, like they accompany the cost function, right? It's an apples and oranges comparison. For both cost function, I simply experimented to find a learning rate that makes it possible to see what is going down. So if you're still curious despite my disavowal, here's the lowdown. I used eta 0.005 in the example just given. You might object that the change in learning rate makes the graph above meaningless. Who cares how fast the neurons learn when our choice of learning rate was arbitrary to begin with? That objection misses the point. The point of the graphs isn't about this absolute speed of learning, it's about how the speed of learning changes. In particular, when we use quadratic cost, learning is slower when the neuron is unambiguously wrong than it is later on. As the neuron gets closer to the correct output, while with the cross entropy learning is faster when the neuron is unambiguously wrong. Okay, so this was a huge deal to take in. First of all, you can see we used a different learning rate in the cross entropy loss function. So you might say then this makes the comparison meaningless. Well, the comparison wasn't to look at the absolute speed of learning, right? What we were looking at is how the speed of learning changes. So in particular, when we use a quadratic cost of learning, when the learning is quite slow, when the neuron is giving when the neuron is unambiguously wrong than it is later on. So like it gives a very wrong output at the beginning. So when the cross entropy learning is faster when the neuron is unambiguously wrong. So even when the neuron is like very far away from the desired target output, the learning is still quite fast in cross entropy loss. Okay, so we've been studying the cross entropy for a single reason. It's easy to generalize the cross entropy to many neuron multi-layer networks. In particular, suppose y is y1, y2, and so on are the desired values at the output neuron, that is, the neuron in the final layer, while a1l, a2l are the actual output values. Then we define the cross entropy by, so you take this term for a particular y1, a1l, and so a1l of a particular layer, and then you iterate over all the neurons in that layer. So this is the same as our earlier expression, equation 57, except that now we have got the sum over all the output neuron. I won't explicitly work through a derivation, but it should be plausible that using the expression 63 avoids a learning slowdown in many neuron networks. If you're interested, you can work through the derivation in the problem below. Incidentally, I am using the term cross entropy in a way that has confused some early readers, since it superficially appears to conflict with other sources. In particular, it's common to define the cross entropy for two particular probability distributions, Pj and Qj, as this. This definition may be connected to equation 57. If we treat a single sigmoid neuron as outputting a probability distribution consisting of neurons activation A and its complement 1 minus A. Okay. So what he's trying to say is if you studied probability distributions, then you might remember the definition of cross entropy from there. It was a summation of Pj, ln Qj over all J. So this was how we define cross entropy with respect to probability distributions. So this definition is quite similar to this if we treat a single sigmoid neuron as outputting a probability distribution and consisting of neurons activation A and 1 minus A. So now the sum of probabilities is 1, right? So if the neurons activation is A, then its complement is 1 minus A. So when you sum over them, you will get one term with y ln of A and the other term with 1 minus y ln 1 minus A if you have only two outputs. However, when we have a sigmoid layer in the first layer, the vector AGL of activation doesn't usually form a probability distribution. As a result, a definition like sigmoid J, PJ, LN, QJ doesn't even make sense, since we're not working with probability distributions. Instead, you can think of 63 as a summed set of per neuron cross entropies, with the activation of each neuron being interpreted as part of a two-element probability distribution. In this sense, 63 is a generalization of the cross entropy for probability distributions. Okay, again, this was a lot to take in, but I'll try to break it down for you. So when we have sigmoid neurons in the very first layer, the outputs are not a probability distribution, right? So as a result, this very definition is not making sense. We can't apply this concept of probability distributions when we are not even working with probability distributions. Instead, for this expression, you can think of it as calculate the cross entropy for each neuron in a layer and summing them up, with the activation of each neuron being interpreted as part of a two-element probability distribution, because you have two elements, a and 1 minus a, or y and 1 minus y. In this sense, this is a generalization of the cross entropy for probability distributions. Of course, in a network, there are no probabilistic elements. They are not really probabilities. When should we use the cross entropy instead of the quadratic cost? In fact, the cross entropy is nearly always the better choice, provided the output neurons are sigmoid neurons. To see why, consider that we are setting up the network. We usually initialize the weights and biases using some sort of random initialization. It may happen that those initial choices result in a network being decisively wrong for some training input. That is, an output neuron will have saturated near 1 when it should be 0 or vice versa. If we are using the quadratic cost, that will slow down learning. It won't stop learning completely since the weights will continue learning from other training inputs, but it's obviously undesirable. Okay, so what they're essentially saying is, in general, cross entropies are always a better choice over quadratic cost if the output neurons are sigmoid activation based. And to see why, when we initialize the weights and biases, we use some randomization, right? So it might be so that the randomizations are such that we get a very wrong output at first. If we use the quadratic cost, we'll get like this sort of a graph while training, which would take a very long time. It would be very slow. There would be some it would, and this is because it would be saturated near a zero or a one. So if you're using the quadratic cost, it will slow down learning. It won't stop learning completely since the weights will continue learning from other training inputs, but it's obviously undesirable. Hence, we use the cross entropy loss. Okay, so let's have a look at this uh, exercise. So one gotcha with the cross entropy is that it can be difficult to remember the respective roles of y's and eights. It's easily to get confused about whether the right form is this or this. So what happens to the second of this expression when y is 0 and a is 1? Does this affect the expression y or y not? Okay, so this is the second expression, which is the wrong one. And let's just see what happens when y is 0 and a is 1 or 1. So when y is 0, this we get a ln 0, and okay, so this will cause a problem, right? Because you have a ln 0 and accompanying it, if you do not have a 0, then this would be some sort of limiting expression. So you can see that when y is 0, when a is 0, then y is also 0, right? Because like when I say, when your the model is outputting 0, it's generally trying to get close to the uh, actual output, and actually it wants a 0. So this term becomes a 0 because this is a term tending to ln 0, but this term is exactly 0, so the product would be 0. Okay, so now in a single neuron discussion at the start of this section, I argued that cross entropy is small if sigmoid z is approximately y for all training inputs. The argument relied on y being equal to either 0 or 1. This is usually true in classification problem, but for some other problems like the regression problem, y can sometimes take value intermediate between 0 and 1. Show that cross entropy is still minimized when sigmoid z is y for all training inputs. When is this is the case, the cross entropy has the value this, and this equation is sometimes known as the binary cross entropy. Okay, so what's the question again? When sigmoid of z is y, you need to show that this expression is still minimized. All right. So I guess you need to take the derivative. So you will have y of 1 here plus I ln y plus 1 plus ln 1 minus y. So you will have, I'm not really sure how will we do this, but I believe it would be something along the lines of taking a derivative and doing it. I'll just be back in a second. Yep, right, I'm back and I just confirmed the solution. So it is exactly as I was saying. Uh, when you take this expression, this is the expression which we're dealing with, and when you take the derivative, you'll get f of t minus y. And so to minimize it, f of t would be y, and so we'll get minus y ln y minus 1 minus y ln 1 minus y. So you can check out the answer here. It's on CS Stack Exchange, and I'll share the link probably. Okay, so the other problem. Many layer multi-neuron networks in the notation introduced in the last chapter show that the quadratic cost that for the quadratic cost the partial derivative is this. The term this sigmoid prime ZJL causes a learning slowdown when an output neuron saturates on the wrong value. Show that for the cross entropy cost, the error delta L for a single training example X is given by this. Use the expression to show that the partial derivative with respect to weights in the output layer is given by this, and this term the term sigmoid prime ZJL has vanished, and so the cross entropy avoids the problem of learning slowdown. Not just when used with a single neuron, as we saw earlier, but also in multi-layer neuron networks. A simple variation on this analysis holds for the biases. If this is not obvious to you, then you should work through that analysis as well. Okay, so this is what you got when you took the partial derivative for the when you were using the quadratic cost, and this term was causing the slowing down. So now we need to show that the error for a single training example is this. And I believe you've shown this before, right? Just give me a moment, I'll just look for it. Yeah. So this is actually that. You're summing up the errors, and this term which we got, this is essentially the other term, I believe. So this problem, you can just go ahead and look up how they solved it. So now using this expression, we need to show that the partial derivative with respect to weights in the output layer is given by this. All right. So akl minus 1 remains, ajl minus yi remains. We just need to replace sigmoid prime of zjl. So to replace this, uh, I'm not really sure how we're going to replace this. Okay, uh, let me work this out as well. Just give me a moment. Right. So for that particular question, this is the solution. So for the first one, I just as I said, we're going to take the derivative and just solve it out. We'll get the same expression. For the second part, I forgot this fourth equation of backpropagation, which we can directly use. So the partial derivative of the cost with respect to weights is this AKL minus 1, the activation of the kth neuron in the L minus 1 layer, times the error in the jth neuron in the LH layer. And you can just substitute this error by this term, and when you sum over all the uh, training examples, then you get the term as we want to show. Okay, so the second question, using the quadratic cost when we have linear neurons in the output layer, suppose that we have a many layer multi neuron network. Suppose all the neurons in the final layer are linear neurons, meaning that the sigmoid activation is not applied and the functions are simply AGL is ZJL. Okay, show that if you use quadratic cost function, the output error delta L for a single training example is given by this. Suppose to the previous problem, similarly to the previous problem, use the expression to show that the partial derivative with respect to the weights and biases in the output layer are given by this. This shows that if the output neurons are linear neurons, then quadratic cost will not rise to any problem with a learning slowdown. In this case, the quadratic cost is in fact an appropriate choice to use. Okay, so I do not have a tablet and all, and also like it's really difficult to come up with a proof on spot. So we'll just have a look at how they've given the solution for it, and you can obviously pause, try this on your own, and not have a look at the solution. Okay, so first of all, we need to show that in that case, the error would be this. So for that, I believe we okay. Let's just have a look. So the error delta ZJL was the partial derivative of C with respect to the activation times the derivative of the activation active. This was the partial derivative with respect to the activated value times the derivative of the activation function at the particular point. And suppose we use this cost function. So the derivative with respect to the activation would be AJL minus YJ. So this term is sorted. Next we need this term. So delta JL is AJL minus YJ. So in vector form it would be this. And now when you use the fourth equation of back propagation, you can get AKL minus 1 times AJL minus YJ. So this term. And then we apply the biases for back propagation. Okay, so the derivative of the bias is just the error. This is the third equation with respect to back propagation. The derivative of the cost with respect to bias, and then you substitute it, you get this term. And then when we take into account all the training examples, then the summation of all, it would just be the summation of this derivative over all training sets. So 1 over n to take the mean, and then summing over x all the trainings examples. So I guess that would be enough for this video. And all right, I forgot to remove this, right? But no worries, I'll probably take care of this in the from the next video onwards. And thank you for joining in. We'll begin with using the cross interpreter classifier in the next video. You can do the standard like, share, and subscribe. Yeah, thank you.